Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and my quarterly book review. So every quarter I review my books that I have read, and this quarter I read 20 books, read and or listened to 20 different books. So I hope you enjoy my book reviews. So today I'm going to kind of go over the many books that I have read or listened to. I am a huge reader. I also listen to a lot of audiobooks because I love stories and I love to learn. And I find that books can be the best mentors for different things in our life, whether that's just going into a story and learning from the characters of those stories and the different morals that are found within the pages of a book, or reading nonfiction and learning from people who are much wiser than us. I finished 2 nonfiction books this quarter. I'm in the process of reading through multiple different nonfictions in like chunks at a time. So those I work through a little slower, but I like to absorb. When I read nonfiction, I like to really absorb and learn and study what I'm reading. So I don't just like to bulldoze through nonfiction. I really want to soak it up and to read it and understand it. And so sometimes I like reread chapters just so I fully grasp what is being said. And so the 2 books that I finished this month that were nonfiction was The Teaching Guide to Miss Kerwin's Pianoforte Method. So this book is a very old book. It's definitely more from the Victorian era. Wonderful book. So this specific publisher, this is the classic reprint series. So this is an old book. It's really hard to find in print, but it was a wonderful way to learn and understand, because I've been a music teacher for 15 years and there's a lot of stuff that I'm actually going to be bringing to online. So studying this method was really taught me a lot, but it also reaffirmed a lot of the things that I believe as a teacher and the things that I was already doing as a music teacher for the last 15 years. So this was really a confirmation reading this book to confirm and to really be encouraged of the methods that I use as a teacher and how I'm going to be able to bring that to people like you here on YouTube or on the internet, homeschool families, when I release my music program for my music curriculum here online. So this was really encouraging for me to read and to know. So that was wonderful to read. Then I finished Tending the Heart of Virtue by Vigen Guardian. I think that's how you say his name. I'm going to link some podcasts below that interview him. This book was wonderful. It was a treasure to read. I learned so much, but this is about how classic stories awaken a child's moral imagination. I am always an advocate for reading to your children and reading living books and cultivating that habit within the home, because so much is found within stories. And I loved how he explained the beauty of the moral imagination within stories that we are probably familiar with, and those classic stories. So this was really, really encouraging to read, especially as a mom who is planning on homeschooling. I really enjoyed this book. As for my fictional reads and listens, I have a little list here because there were a lot of them. Anyways, so the fictional books I read were the Housewitch series. So the Housewitch books 1, 2, and 3. Such fun books, very lighthearted, very clever. They are a fantasy, comedy, romance, but not like trashy romance. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's not like that kind of romance. Just lighthearted, funny, sarcastic, but clever humor. Not just like, oh, this person's trying to be funny when they write. It was actually funny. There was a lot of times when I laughed and it made me chuckle. So the Housewitch books 1 through 3, very simple, very easy to read, good stories. I have a virtual book club that I've been doing for 3 years that I started. And so the 3 books that we read for this quarter was Housewitch 1, which motivated me to read Housewitch 2 and 3, Emma by Jane Austen, and A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. So those were the 3 books that my virtual book club read this quarter, and wonderful books. Like I said, Housewitch, loved it, super easy to read. Emma, I love Emma. It's just such a funny book. I just laugh so much when I read different classic authors, and Jane Austen makes me laugh. I love Jane Austen, but Emma is probably the funniest of her books. The characters make me smile. I love the villain of the story, you know, like just the villain character. They're not really a villain, but you know what I mean. They're just funny, comical. The wit and humor is just spectacular, and Jane Austen was just an amazing author, and her stories are just great. And then The Tale of Two Cities, I had never read this particular Dickens novel, and I've learned a lot. So I learned a lot from it. My particular copy, which is on my shelf up there, had a little post kind of notes about the story and some stuff about just the ideas behind his historical fiction, because he only has a couple books that are historical fiction, and they were, you know, I haven't read the other one, but this was the first of his historical fiction that I read. I've read lots of other Dickens books, and I love the Victorian era of writing. I just am a big fan of Dickens, his stories, his characters, his kind of just what he tries to get at from a society, culture, religious, political, all the elements that are within his books are powerful to read, but also the character and the virtues that are in these books are really quite something. And A Tale of Two Cities was no different. It was, you know, there's sadness, there's sacrifice, there's love, there's redemption, there's forgiveness. There's so much in his books, but Tale of Two Cities was really powerful to read, and it takes place within the French Revolution. And so if you know anything about your history and the French Revolution in the 18th century, it was a very evil, dark time in France, lots of death, and the book really kind of captures a lot of that. So quite the read, worth it, definitely worth reading. Whereas contrasting The Tale of Two Cities, Emma was written in the Regency era, right? Like Jane Austen. And so the styles, even though they're both classic living books, the styles are so different. And the things that come from Dickens are very different than the things that come from Austen. And I really enjoy reading these types of books to learn these different styles of writing, but also to be captivated in different ways and to appreciate good literature. I listen to a lot of books because, you know, I'm a mom, I'm busy, I get my headphones on, you know, listening to books and podcasts all the time. So I go through books pretty quickly. And so this quarter, the books I listened to, the first one was Murtagh, which is by Christopher Paolini. I have been a fan of Christopher Paolini since his first books were released, gosh, forever ago. I was in high school when they were released. Aragon, Eldest, Bersinger, and Inheritance. Love his books, love the story of his books, and Murtagh did not disappoint. Murtagh was probably one of my favorite characters in his original series. So having a whole book designated to the character of Murtagh and seeing the development of him since the 4 previous books, I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know his character more, but seeing, you know, Christopher Paolini kind of focus on the virtues and the honor and the characteristics that Murtagh has. where he wasn't like highlighted in the other books because those were focused on Aragon more so. So excellent book. Definitely read it. If you haven't read the other ones, highly recommend reading Christopher Paolini's fantasy books. The next two books that I read were part of the Pendragon cycle. So I've been working my way through that by Stephen Lawhead. Now these are books, cannot recommend the Pendragon cycle. If you don't know, the Pendragon cycle is about King Arthur, and Stephen Lawhead has lots of historical fiction, but he takes a lot of myths that he rewrites. So the Pendragon cycle has been fantastic to read. I read Arthur and I read Pendragon. So those two, I have one more left in the series, the one on the Holy Grail. So I am going to read that one, waiting for it from my library. So that's the last book, but I'm a big fan of myth and legends. And so the Pendragon myth is no different. There's so much to be learned, and it's such wonderful stories that captivate you. Can't recommend that enough. I've read these by Terry Pratchett, and he is a Scottish author, and these books are fantasy comedy. They're like young adult children's fiction, but they are so fun. They have been wonderful to read. One of my homeschool mom friends recommended them to me, and I have been loving them. So I've read the first three, and I'm waiting on the next one. So you have The Wee Free Men, Hatful of Sky, and Wintersmith. So I've read those three. I have laughed. I have thoroughly enjoyed those books. They follow the story of a young witch in Scotland, and they are just so funny, and the humor. I've listened to them on audio by I can't think of the guy's name who read them, but he's Scottish, and so he reads it very well, because he kind of, when you have that accent, it just adds a whole nother level to the book. And because they're Scottish, take place in Scotland, and some of the characters have these very heavy, thick accents, and it's just so much fun to listen to the story being read, because I could probably read it, but I'm not gonna have that Scottish accent in my head. That is just so fun to listen to. So Terry Pratchett has been a delight to listen to and to kind of get captivated by his stories. And so I can't wait to finish the Discworld series. I have 2 more books, I think, left in that series, and so I'm looking forward to finishing those. The next book I read, was okay. Contemporary Maggie Moves On by, what's her name? Anyways, clearly it wasn't that, didn't really strike me as anything original. I was just kind of like your cheesy rom-com. It wasn't that captivating. I listened to it and I was like, okay. I was one and done. I was like, yep. Didn't do anything for me, which is a lot of contemporary books. A lot of times they don't do anything for my soul, my heart, right? They just kind of are fluff, and they're easy to listen to. I don't really learn much from them. The stories don't really do much for me. So yeah, Maggie Moves On. I can take it or leave it. Next book, I actually listened to it. I love rereading the Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. I reread it pretty regularly. And I finished listening to The Two Towers, that was read and narrated by Andy Serkis. I have already listened to The Fellowship and Return of the King, because, out of order, whatever. But The Two Towers, listening to him read those books have been wonderful, because they are some of my favorite books. And I probably don't think I could listen to, I'll read them, but if I was to ever listen to someone read them again, it would have to be Andy Serkis, because of the way he narrates and sings the songs in the books and does the voices. It just captivates you when you're listening to it, and so good, wonderful. I mean, I just love Tolkien, and Andy Serkis just took these books to another level, like listening to it, and he did a wonderful job. Okay, next two books that I read, Clouds of Witness and Unnatural Death. These are two mysteries by Dorothy Sayers. I have really enjoyed reading her books. They're very light, easy reads. They're classic mysteries, and they're very good. They keep me guessing. I don't really know who's done it, but they're fun. They're good books. I have slowly been working my way through the Wheel of Time series. This is the next chunk of books that I've listened to. I've been listening to them because they are very big books, and I just don't have time to sit and read those books. Being a mom, it's just easier for me to listen to them. They're very long books, and I listen to them on like double time, and they're still long books. They average about like 25 hours of listening time, and on double time cuts it in half, but they're so long. So I have listened to 6, 7, 8, and 9 in this last quarter. So I listened to 4 of the books, and it was, so let's see, the names are Lord of Chaos was number 6, Crown of Swords was number 7, Path of Daggers was number 8, and Winter's Heart was number 9. These books have been a commitment. Like, finally in book 9, I'm like, oh, it's starting to get good. It was a little bit slow of a build, and I get it, fantasy, you have to really commit to some fantasy series because they're building a whole world. They're building cultures, they're building different, societies, they're building, all these different types of things, right? So the setting, the world, right? There's so much that's being built in within fantasy series, and this was no different. It's no Tolkien, so I had to keep reminding myself nobody is Tolkien, but they are good books. They're taken me some time to get into them, but now number 9, it's starting to pick up. The characters certain characters I'm starting to like and not get annoyed with, because their character development is starting to stick. I'm like, oh, okay, I like this character now who I hated for the last 8 books. So finally, I think now that I'm on number 9, I can commit to the next 10 books of the series. Okay, so we'll see how those go, but I listened to those 4 this quarter. Yeah, those were the 20 books that I read and or listened to this quarter. I recommend continuing, like if you're wanting to get into reading and trying to cultivate that habit, get some apps, listen to some books, get some nonfiction books that are applicable to the season of life that you're in, that you're wanting to learn from. I think so many times, I think it's so common for moms to forget to grow ourselves, and to learn. We think it's really easy for us moms to put ourselves aside and to be like, we'll do it later. But then when we're really in the midst of it and we need advice, sometimes we don't have someone to go to, but there's so much to be found in books. The thing about reading books, and when you read books and you study, I feel like I've learned more as a mom just reading and studying books and things that from people that are much wiser than me and have so much more knowledge than I do. One, it's humbling, and to learn, you must be humble. You can't always approach something thinking you know all the answers, and then because you're not teachable. So work on that first. Have a teachable spirit. But I think as moms, we just so often forget about ourselves to learn. And there's so much encouragement to be found within books. And even just stories, even fictional stories. There's so much to be found within fictional books. And I am so thankful for the books that I have read, because I learned from them. Yeah, some are fluffy and whatever, but sometimes you need a fluffy book to just turn off your brain, right? So I hope that you continue to get inspired by reading books. I'm gonna link, or not link, I'm gonna put the list of the books that I read this quarter below. And if you would like to be part of a virtual book club, I have a virtual book club that we read every single month. We read a different book every month, and I've had this book club this was our 3rd year that I started and have been hosting this book club online. There's moms from all over that take part in it, which is really fun, and we tune in once a month via Zoom, and it's a good way to be motivated to read maybe something that you wouldn't normally read. And so this next quarter we're reading a few different types of books, from classic to contemporary, to challenge and to kind of expand our knowledge as readers. So yeah. And if you're looking for maybe some recommendations, you can always also follow me on Goodreads, and it's always fun to connect. I'd love to see what other people are reading as well. And share with me some of your favorite books, favorite genres. I'd love to know what you're reading right now. So thanks for tuning in to today's video and my quarterly book review. Hope to catch you next time. Bye.